This is Contagious.
Hi and welcome to This is Contagious, a show where we look at how contagious ideas are shaping brands and culture. I'm Alex.
And I'm Katrina.
And this week we're coming to you fresh from the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity. So we're going to be talking about the most interesting issues being discussed and chatting about some of the most creative and impactful work winning the big awards. First of all, Katrina, could you do me a little bit of a favour here? It's a stretch to say that my mother-in-law is a fan of the show, but she definitely listens to the podcast. Could you maybe explain what Cannes Lion is, as if you're talking to someone that has never been and doesn't have actually anything to do with marketing at all?
I feel like I just want to correct you immediately, Alex. We are anything but fresh from the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity. Fresh is not what I'm feeling right now. But yes, I will explain for your mother-in-law, Jan, isn't it?
Shout out, Jan.
What we're dealing with here. I think Cannes Lions was possibly once thought of, I guess, as the Oscars for advertising, an awards ceremony rewarding the most impressive, influential and effective advertising campaigns from all around the world. I feel as though it's evolved to a point where it's a lot more like Glastonbury for brands and marketers these days. This is a really big business convention by the sea, a sort of a conference sur mer, if you will, where thousands and thousands of people working in advertising, marketing and brands from all over the world congregate in the beautiful seaside town of Cannes, where there is a glittering Palais des Festivals parked right on the beachfront in this glorious town. There's an education program. There is a great deal of sort of fringe activities and gatherings, and the awards are still a massive, massive part of the agenda. This is an opportunity to reflect on what has been amazing in the industry and celebrate the people who made it.
It's sort of like going on holiday with all your colleagues, and everything you talk about is work, but you're quite happy about it. And it's worth saying, like, there's a lot of kind of brands, a lot of tech companies kind of set up on the beaches. You could get down to Pinterest Beach, you could literally get a free tattoo. I believe the hot ticket on the merch front this year was a tote bag from the Canva installation. Did you manage to snag one of those?
I did not. I feel like I've aged out of the full merch program again.
Yes, happens to us all. Look, we'll maybe get properly into the festival in a second. What was personally contagious for you during the Cannes week?
What was contagious for me during Cannes? I think one of the most interesting seminar sessions was Byron Sharp and Mark Ritson. These are two of the most influential academics in marketing, big voices in their own right. Byron Sharp wrote a book called How Brands Grow, which Mark Ritson describes as the most important marketing book of our era. And, you know, he means that when he said it. But one of the most glorious moments in all of Cannes for me this year was when he also on stage called it out as being a brutally boring read. And he's read it 3 times, so he should know. So I got a lot out of that because I found it crushingly hard to get from cover to cover of that book. And I'm glad it's not just me. Wouldn't want to say it in front of Byron, but
yeah, bullet points could be the way forward if you're not a big reader of the academic theory.
Or How Brands Grow, the graphic novel. There's an idea for the next iteration.
Didn't you have an idea for How Brands Grow the musical, which we were going to pitch to Cannes one year, and we didn't quite have the chops to pull it off, I believe.
I have definitely said that, but then I'm also a proponent of Amazon, the musical, as well. I think that's a gift for a creative person looking for a ticket to fame. Also, like the Byron Sharp Mark Ritson session, I found that really interesting because it was all about the 5 things that they could agree upon as people who famously don't agree on very much about how marketing works. One of the things that they did agree on most wholeheartedly, though, was this idea that the idea of brand purpose is basically nonsense. And it's an interesting one for me because I think there's definitely some truth in that, but I think there's a flip side of that argument to be had as well.
I think the flip side was possibly evident in Cannes, where the AXA 3 Words campaign, which I would probably call pretty purposeful, won the Creative Effectiveness Award, thereby proving, whether it's purposefully or not, that something in there was certainly effective. I think for me, I found particularly contagious, there was a really interesting session run by Jake Dubbins of the Conscious Advertising Network. He had Charlotte Scadden from the UN there. So Charlotte Scadden is the Senior Advisor on Information Integrity at the UN. Quite a serious person to have having a festival of creativity. She was talking about the impact of kind of technology and sort of AI on misinformation and disinformation, which she is saying is now effectively the number one issue they're trying to crack. They said it because it impacts every single other issue for them. It's like climate change, democracy, elections, public health. There's this great erosion of trust, this erosion of truth being fueled by AI, being fueled by things like social media. And it's basically become their number one thing that they have to crack. So I think it was fascinating to hear about that, fascinating to hear what they're doing. It was interesting that they were pitching it at Cannes Lion as a thing. Just I think the pop culture view of advertising is that it's a morally bankrupt profession. If you look at how it's represented in kind of TV and films, if you ever want a morally bankrupt person, you make them an ad man, right? So you get Don Draper from Mad Men, Mel Gibson in What Women Want, Sacha Baron Cohen's new film, Ladies First, Matthew McConaughey in How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, Eddie Murphy in Boomerang. Literally, the list of morally bankrupt people in film and TV that are ad men, it's a huge overlap. So interesting to see people like Jake Dubbins and the UN trying to have, create a sense of, look, there's what's good for business, but then there's also what's morally right and what we should be doing for the world. I thought it was a fascinating session. If you get a chance, you should look that up.
I think the point about truth and trust in media generally and in communications generally, it's so fascinating to me. I also saw somebody speaking on that particular topic, Daisy Veerasingham, who's the president and CEO of Associated Press. She was doing a Future Gazers session on the importance of trusted information in our world. If we can't agree on fundamental verified facts, we're basically all kind of screwed. The point that she was making in her session was that if trust in the environment that we all operate in diminishes, then it impacts all of us. And that is why we all have a collective responsibility to facts and accuracy, the idea of the truth as opposed to my truth, which is very much in the ascendancy at the moment, I think.
Yeah, not to blow my own trumpet on this. I gave a talk at Cannes. I like to think it was reasonably well received. But one of the slides I had in it was a Google Trends slide, so it just shows Google search data. And if you search for, go on Google Trends and search, is this true? So what you see is a graph that goes from about 2005 and it flatlines the whole way through. And then at about 2020, it just takes off at like a 45-degree angle. So people are just searching for, is this true? It's just a really interesting way of kind of surfacing this sense of like trust being eroded. And it's a very, very specific time that it was eroded from. And I think it was around that COVID era. And then, of course, hit again when generative AI came out. Shall we move on from our own personal things that we thought were contagious, which seems to have taken us to a reasonably dark, distrustful place, to something maybe a little bit more interesting?
Sure, it's going to get dark and distrustful as well, though, Alex, to be perfectly honest.
Well, it felt pretty sunny while we were in Cannes, didn't it? I think for me, I think like it was, if you've looked at any commentary about the festival, anyone's hot take on it, I think clearly one of the headline issues that everyone was talking about was, guess which two letters?
Would they be A and I?
It would definitely be A and I. And I think when we look at the ad industry's attitude towards AI, like over the last couple of years, so maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the general sense at the festival, I think, was kind of like, hey, look at us. We get it. We're tech literate. We're all over this stuff. Last year, if you went through kind of all the talks, went through the transcripts, as I did, what you actually found was this incredible, overwhelming sense of the need to sort of defend humanity. So there's a real sense of AI will never replace human creativity, it can never replace the human touch, the inspiration, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. Yeah, blah, 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 all that human stuff. This year was really interesting, I think. I think what we're seeing is something of like a bifurcation, like a splitting of what people are kind of working out was kind of uniquely human on one side and what was uniquely machine on the other. So the human side of things was entirely unique. Quotes I have pulled out include, no automation can replace the human touch. AI can only recycle what has come before. Data understands the past. Human creativity builds the future. In an AI world, your irreplaceable lived human experience is your moat. And last of all, robots don't build brands, you do. The last one being Mark Pritchard, the head marketer of P&G. So there's this real sense of, we are beautiful, unique snowflakes. And then on the other side, there was also...
I'm sensing a massive butt hovering in the background, Alex.
Well, I'm glad we don't get to see what's hovering in your background, Katrina. But there was a real kind of actually AI and tech is actually good for some things. There was a lot of talk from the tech companies. OpenAI was there, sort of Meta was there, and there was, I think, the VP of product for Instagram was saying, AI, it's just an amplifier for human creativity. There was the chief revenue officer from OpenAI saying that literally not a day goes by where someone doesn't tell them that ChatGPT has literally saved their life. In fact, Mark Pritchard from P&G was talking about how they're using kind of internal AI tools to kind of 20x their social asset creation. I mean, did you see much of this? Did you sort of fall one side or the other on this?
I did not see a lot of the seminars about artificial intelligence, so I am behind the curve on this. I feel as though overall the sense that I got of the chat around AI this year was sort of edging towards the more positive side than last year. I felt like there was a bit less doomerism perhaps, and a bit less the sky is falling, all of our jobs are going away within 18 months kind of fear being expressed.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree with that. There did seem to be a lot more confidence. But I think there was a really interesting session from Demis Hassabis, the CEO of Google DeepMind. So Demis was talking about how he's trying to build AGI, artificial general intelligence, so an AI that can basically do anything. And when asked kind of why are you doing this? He's really interesting. He's like, look, I believe it will solve the climate crisis. It can help solve clean energy. It's going to solve complex scientific problems like protein folding. And obviously, was it AlphaFold? Is the Google DeepMind?
AlphaFold is like a massive project of theirs, yeah.
So it was really interesting that. And actually, one of the things that Demis said was, emotions, creativity, dreaming, consciousness, these are all human things, are all uniquely human things. And his theory is that if we can build an AI system that is intelligent, that can do these things, it may actually reveal what's special about the human mind, and it may help us to understand it more. Although one of the thing that probably got the most applause in Demis's talk was when he said he just wanted AI to answer all his emails for him, and he didn't even want to look at his own inbox, which felt a little bit like maybe missing the
pedestrian.
Point of... a little bit pedestrian, maybe not use or good use of all those server farms, and also maybe missing the point of human to human communication, one might say.
Maybe just a smidge, but yeah, I definitely think that he's probably the most effective ambassador for the whole field of AI right now. Oh gosh, this is such a sidebar, but I listened to his appearance on the British institution radio show Desert Island Discs, and what an utterly charming, delightful human being he turned out to be. I think we need an episode of Desert Island Discs featuring Dario, featuring Elon, and featuring Sam as well, so that we can judge them all on the same kind of criteria, musical playlists, what they mean to them, and whether that means we can trust them as individuals.
The other interesting thing from the Demis Hassabis session to do with creativity was he actually brought on the head of A24. So Google DeepMind has just announced this partnership with A24. The sort of independent film studio.
Powerhouse, I would say, even.
Powerhouse, responsible for things like Marty Supreme, Everything Everywhere, All at Once, Backrooms, their big hit of this year. It's caused a fair bit of, I think they've got a fair bit of flack for it on the announcement, because there's a sense of you felt like, kind of one of the last, bastions and stalwarts of independent creativity. And you've kind of gone over to the dark side a little bit by partnering with an AI company. And the head of, I think, A24 has said, look, we really just want to be part of the conversation rather than standing on the sidelines. But during Cannes, what he actually said was look, we work with a lot of creative people and creators that want to bring storytelling to life. And 100% of the ones that we meet and talk to, they've all been constrained in some way, whether it's financial or just the limits of what can be done. And they believe AI will be an unlocker to creativity. Again, just kind of fueling that sense of optimism, I think that maybe the industry's feeling a bit more.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a bit more openness to that, and I think we've now got the very powerful example of the film Dreams of Violets, which was the first ever fully AI generated film to be entered at a respected film festival. And that is very clearly, it's a project about the protests in Iran, where the Iranian government was responsible for killing, we think, tens of thousands of people. Good luck trying to unlock financing for that in the space of 2.5 months, which I think is how long it took to make that film. Also, just on the A24 thing, I think we can say that they went over to the light side of the dark side and partnering with DeepMind rather than like jumping into bed with Sam Altman and OpenAI.
Yes, let's none of us jump into bed with Mr. Altman. What was a very big thing for you during Cannes?
I think the conversation around social and creators was an unmissable and really sort of energy-filled part of the programme this year. A couple of people that I spoke to in particular sort of made an impression on me. One of the people that I interviewed for Contagious during the festival is Rachel Carton, who is the founder of That Rarest of Things, a Substack newsletter that is genuinely beloved and sort of hotly anticipated every issue by her subscribers. So link in bio is all about social media strategy, the people who are making all the wonderful campaigns that genuinely kind of respond brilliantly to culture come to life. One of the things that she spoke about I found absolutely fascinating. She talks about this idea of what she calls Mr. Rogers marketing.
So Mr. Rogers, sorry, just to interrupt, Mr. Rogers, the famously kind of avuncular TV personality of a slighter kind of like more nostalgic era of America. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I think the show that the children's show that he made, something like Welcome to My Neighborhood or something like that, but very much predicated on the idea that you listen to and respect your audience, even though they're only tiny people aged 5 and 6 years old. So this idea of deep respect for the opinions of the people who are interacting with your content. So she's advocating for media strategies and social media strategies that I guess optimize for kindness, for empathy, and for community building over sort of the baser tactics like shock value and cheap engagement. So all of that as a kind of antidote to the internet's hostility and the rage bait that we see every single day.
So sorry to interrupt on this. Is Rachel Carton saying that this is a thing that she is increasingly seeing getting engagement, or more just like back to a moral thing, like morally it would be good to us? Because I know that in the past what we've seen is algorithms have a tendency to reward the rage bait, sort of the more inflammatory, divisive content.
This is something that I think she is both seeing do well when it lands and advocating for as well, because I think, we all see so much of the kind of just relentless, I think, pie throwing is how Mr. Rogers himself described it. His show was in fact a kind of reaction to the idea that television had come onto the scene as this insanely powerful new media opportunity. And I think he said people were using it to throw pies at each other. And he felt very strongly that should not be the case. That was the basis for his completely delightful show going forward.
On a similar note, there was a really interesting session on the forum stage with Laura Nessler, who's the VP of Community at Reddit, talking about marketers and how they can interact with communities a little bit more. And it's not exactly sort of the throwing things, but she was drawing a distinction saying, audiences get spoken to, communities speak to one another, and communities becoming a little bit more important, especially as we're seeing people spending more time in messaging services, in group chats, places like Discord. She had a really interesting kind of an analogy saying, look, if you think of like the marketing funnel, which typically starts kind of big and broad at the top, put a lot of people in the top, and as you go down to a point of purchase, more and more people just kind of drop out of it. Mm-hmm. So the community funnel is basically the flip of that, you kind of the opposite. So her advice, speaking from what she sees happening on Reddit, is like it's all about finding that small kind of 1% that's really engaged. So they're kind of like, that's the small bit of the funnel. And then they engage and interact and attract other people towards them. And I thought that was really interesting. She talked about it. It's much more thinking about, brands are used to operating on a stage where you're kind of broadcasting out to people. It's a real look at me kind of thing. Communities, it's much more like a city. It's much more interconnected. Everyone has a role to play, but you aren't kind of shouting and drawing attention to yourself.
So more of an ecosystem kind of a vibe, I guess.
Exactly that, yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it? One of the people who made a big impression on me this week was Mary Kish, who is, I think, the head of community at Twitch. And just what you were saying about the sort of performative, broadcasty nature of brands traditionally made me think of her, I guess. I feel like if you look back at the beginnings of Twitch, it began as a platform for watching. So mostly you were watching people play games, but it's evolved into something that's much more about participation and community and the doing of things together. While at the same time, we've seen our sort of traditional social platforms like Facebook and Instagram become more and more like a sort of one-way broadcast. I think what's the phrase that we've all been kind of seeing crop up in the last few months, this idea that everything is becoming television, whether it's podcasts or social media. It's
100%. 100%. And social media is infinitely less social and infinitely more media than it was, certainly 10 years ago. And I think we're actually seeing scrolling across all age groups decline, possibly as a result of that, just being the sense of being broadcast at rather than spoken with. Yeah.
However, on Twitch, that is very much not the dynamic. That's not what they're about. And Mary spoke really kind of effectively about the differences between audiences and community. So audiences are sort of leaning back, they're more passive, they're receiving information, whereas your community, as you said, they're exchanging views, they are getting involved, they are participating in ways that alter what they are seeing in the moment, especially on Twitch, where that's so much a part of the dynamic. And in talking to her, it made me remember something that I'd seen hilariously on social media, probably on Instagram, one of those relentless Instagram videos. Somebody made the observation that so much of our culture at the moment and the moments when we get together with our friends, it's based on the idea of catching up with them. So we'll go out for coffee or we'll go and get a drink and we'll kind of give them the blow-by-blow account of the different things that we've done in the week since we saw each other. And then they'll have their turn. They'll tell us the things that they did. And, on one level, that's being social to a point. But what is missing from that is the whole idea of doing things together and experiencing things together. That gives a sort of qualitatively different kind of a feeling and dynamic to your relationship than simply like posting the updates in person, face to face. And I just feel like that's such an interesting thing that I can feel brands coming back more towards this idea of getting people to do things with each other in the same space as each other, shared experience as being much more impactful, much more lasting and resonant, and creating deeper and more affecting memories, I guess.
I think that's totally true of Cannes Lion even itself. I was sort of going through sort of some of the hot takes on LinkedIn. I would say the sentiment around it, if anyone went, is incredibly positive. And while searching for the word contagious to see if there was any talk about what Contagious had done in Cannes.
You're so lame.
I'm incredibly lame. I'm lame-maxing, you might say. Now I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, there was so like the phrase that kept coming up was like the energy was contagious, the inspiration was contagious. This relentless positivity of, I think, just people physically being in a place and the ideas kind of knocking around and hitting each other and people going, that's interesting. A lot of positivity for, I got to actually go into the basement of the Palais and see the work, because the work is all up on the board so you can see it. But so much of it was coming around from like, I met these people, we had these ideas. It was the physical part of it that was really where the value was for a lot of people.
100%. And I feel as though it's such a major part of why the festival persists and indeed has sort of gathered more people to it. It's almost like a momentum generator for the whole industry. Things right now are pretty up and down. There's a lot of disquieting things happening in the background, happening in the foreground in terms of what we do, how we do it, the impact it's having on the world. The power of getting all of those people who want to do cool things and make a bit of an impact in one place at one time is a tremendous net benefit.
And talking about doing cool things, now's probably a good time for us to move on to the awards. So there's, lest we forget that the heart of Cannes Lion in many ways is the awards, right? Lots of amazing campaigns and initiatives entered into Cannes this year. Who do we think was on it in terms of cultural astuteness in the awards? Who was potentially culture maxing? I don't want to make too many maxing jokes, but it seems to be maxing is the thing right now.
Stop it with the maxing. So many interesting campaigns. Some of my favourite ones were quite kind of just quite fun and light-hearted. I think an incredibly well-liked winner, and it was in the brand experience and activation category, was the campaign from Columbia Outdoor Gear, a campaign called Expedition Impossible. So this was them throwing down the gauntlets to flat earthers all over the planet, challenging them to go out and find the edge of the earth. If they could take a picture of it, then they were going to hand the whole company to that person as their reward for identifying the edge of the earth. And it just was such a delightful, humorous, gently teasing kind of a campaign that absolutely nailed the sort of conspiracy theory tranche of the zeitgeist at the moment. And it's an absolute magnet for participation and discussion and buzz in general. And they just absolutely nailed.
This thing's such a delight, isn't it? I think this is Adam and Eve TBWA London.
It is,
a well-deserved a number of wins. I think they scooped like 4 sort of golds and Grand Prix in total on this.
Bravo! Yeah.
Do you know what I like about this?
Tell me everything.
I think when you look at so the Columbia Expedition, it's an outdoor brand. When you look at kind of how the other brands position themselves in that space, you got like North Face and REI. It's all about kind of like getting out into nature. You got Patagonia and REI again, like strong positions around protecting the environment. Now, obviously, Columbia's in a similar territory, right? But no one was talking about finding the edge of the flat Earth. I think the bit that's missing in all these other brands' positions around adventure and exploration and sustainability kind of is the fun. And this is just a ton of fun. It's absolutely delightful what they did here.
The fun and also like the physicality of it as well. Excuse me. The campaign prior to the Flat Earth campaign from Columbia was a big kind of brand reset around the idea that the physicality of the great outdoors is something that you absolutely have to be respectful and mindful of. But they didn't express that in a kind of sententious way. They made a film showing all the nightmare things that could happen to you while you were out scrambling around in the wilderness, like getting bitten by snakes. But they did it in a really kind of gonzo, gung-ho way that actually tapped into the slightly gonzo, gung-ho spirit that fuels a lot of the adventurers who are going to be their customers.
I think that if I find myself sleeping in a tent, full stop, I think that something has gone wrong at that point. I'm not one of nature's natural campers. I'm going to talk about another campaign I liked in a minute, but I think as a general comment, humour, entertainment, just a lightness seem to be so much stronger across all the winners than maybe we've seen in previous years, even when we're dealing with some quite serious issues. I mean, like the flat Earth thing isn't necessarily a serious issue, but depending on where you stand on it, it's maybe a contentious issue.
Yeah.
I think the one that I really liked was there's a glorious campaign called Welcome Back Paisano. This is from the beer brand Tecate and the agency Le Pub in Mexico. So this won the gold in brand experience and activation. And basically what it is, it's a program that helps repatriated Mexicans find work by offering them jobs and franchise opportunities in the Heineken Tiendas 6 retail network. So Tecate is a Heineken brand. Heineken owns this Tiendas 6 chain of kind of convenience stores. There are more than 6. The name of them is 6, right? So I guess like the background to this is very politically charged. Like you've got the Trump administration massively increasing deportations, and so what the Tecate is doing is just helping these Mexicans find work. Now, I think there is a very serious message here in this. We interviewed the Tecate brand director Esteban Velasco, who said that, we wanted first of all to generate pride among all the Mexicans. You send a very powerful message. Mexicans are the best workforce in the world. If you don't want them, don't worry. We will receive them with open arms and with real opportunities, right? So yes, there's a serious message, but the way they communicated it was actually quite positive. They communicated it quite lightly. I think one of the headlines on one of their ads was, "God bless America for sending back our best workers," which I think was just glorious.
Yeah, they absolutely did that thing of, instead of focusing on the problem, they focused on the solution. And instead of focusing on America, they focused on Mexicans and what they could do to support them. I read our Insight and Strategy interview with the team who worked on this particular campaign, and Aldo Ramirez, who's the CCO at Le Pub Mexico City, the agency that created the campaign, said, if you say you're a Mexican brand, then do something for Mexicans. And I think what he really nails is this idea that if you do things rather than say things, people really respond to that. He says people react more to things they see brands doing than to things brands say they will do. And I think that distinction is coming through kind of loud and clear in the successful purpose-driven campaigns that we're seeing throughout Cannes.
I mean, to the quote you just read out, this is Tecate behaving like the official beer of Mexico. So just beautifully sort of balancing the seriousness of the initiative with the lightness of the communication. I think, didn't the case study sign off with something quite funny as well?
Yeah, I mean, the sign off for the case study video was "Good luck, motherfuckers," addressed to Mexico's neighbors north of the border. So Minsha Georgiou, who was the jury president for Social and Creator, said that, work that has a social purpose behind it or a social message behind it doesn't need to be sad or blackmail everybody emotionally in order to be effective. You can do this stuff and you can still be light, you can be fun, and you can be clever about it. Not just like, I don't know, being boringly responsible in some tedious way.
Yes, be humorously responsible. While we're on Social and Creator, should we talk a little bit about what won in Social and Creator? So that was the Heineken. It's a campaign called, This Could Have Been a Heineken. Is it called that?
No, it's just called Could Have Been a Heineken. It's a tremendous campaign. I particularly love this one, and the reason I particularly love it is because I particularly hate voice notes, and voice notes were at the center of this particular campaign mechanism. It's all based on the idea that all around the world, people are sending more and more voice notes than ever, and these are kind of like the opposite of conversation. A voice note is a monologue. It's a way of basically showing your friends and family that you can't be arsed having a conversation or a chat with them. You can't even be arsed typing out a message with your thumbs. You're just going to drone into your phone and expect them to sit through that at the other end. Drone
into your phone. Do we think that if Shakespeare were alive today, he'd be a big fan of the voice note, the audio soliloquy?
I'd love to know what Shakespeare would make of social media. Anyway, back to the plot about Heineken. They created a campaign that meant if you received a particularly long voice note, 3 minutes I think was their suggested length, you could send it to Heineken's WhatsApp chatbot, and in return you would be sent back a voucher for 2 beers so that you could go and have a proper face-to-face chat in a bar with your friend. Just a delightful way of getting people in the same room at the same time for a conversation. So popular with juries this year.
It's a lovely campaign. It's so culturally on it in terms of getting that little insight of like, it's a pain point. Why not go down the bar and have a beer? I think it's also broadly true that once someone has chosen their first beer of the evening, they're more likely to drink the same brand again that evening. So if you make Heineken the first beer of the night, it's more likely to be the second or third beer too. So it's not just a bit of fun and a giveaway. I think there probably is like a really interesting bit of business positivity coming off of driving that footfall into the bar.
100%. And also it's a consistent sort of brand positioning that they're using in different ways in different parts of the world as well.
Another campaign I think that did very well in the festival this year that we were a big fan of, in fact it was one of our predictions for what was going to win big, and it did win big, was the Kit Kat heist. So people probably remember, because it was quite a big news story back in March, 12 tons of Kit Kats were stolen in a heist in Europe. And then Kit Kat, along with their agency VML London, produced the stolen Kit Kat tracker. So this won the Grand Prix in PR. So the Kit Kat tracker allowed you to put a serial number in, and you could then track whether your Kit Kat that you bought was one of the stolen ones. In theory, helping the brand track down the culprit to this. This was a ton of fun. Probably not a ton of fun for Kit Kat, which got 12 tons of their chocolate stolen. But certainly 1 ton of equal fun for everyone else. So it kind of framed what was basically a treasure hunt for people into this kind of true crime detective game. I think what I liked about this was it kind of reframed the product from being this kind of mass-produced snack you could buy at any store into something potentially remarkable. It's got that kind of Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, am I going to get a golden ticket?
And delightfully, you don't get anything if you find that you've got a stolen Kit Kat. There's no reward. There's no kind of payola from the brand. It's just the joy of taking part and having a story to tell about it. That's the win for the
It's exactly
customer.
that. And actually, it created a whole load of social collateral for the brand. People posting about it. I think some people made songs about it. It had a huge impact on social for them. We interviewed, again, 2 things. We spoke to the team behind this. So one was Ryan McManus, Chief Creative Officer at VML, who had this lovely quote that audiences are far more interested in playing with a story than simply consuming one. And I think that goes back to everything we were just talking about earlier about communities, about, acting like a city, not like a broadcaster. Interestingly, I also had a bit of a sidebar conversation with Sanjeev Mistry, who is the ECD of VML, again, the agency that made this campaign. And I said, I was a bit worried that, when this thing landed in the jury room, I was worried that other jury members would look at it and go, yeah, well, if you stole 12 tons of my product, I could do something creative with it. And he had this really interesting bit of behind-the-scenes insight. He said, well, actually, we did the research. And when we looked into it, it turns out stuff gets stolen all the time. And kind of the crisis comms kick in. And people just want to keep it under wraps. We're basically just one of the few people that ever told people that happened. And then we did something really creative with it. And they saw it as an opportunity, not as
disaster.
A disaster, exactly.
It was so interesting in the press conference where they announced this particular award for Kit Kat. One of the points that the president of this jury made was that crisis communications are the communication of caution. Everything is incredibly sort of carefully weighed up before a decision is made in typical circumstances. But what happened here was the opposite of that. They just understood in a heartbeat that the universe had dropped a true crime narrative into their laps. And they had a sort of moment of decision. Would they play or would they pass? Well, luckily they were able to take that decision in the moment and they decided to play and make something out of this. And a big part of the reason they felt emboldened to do that is because this is a brand that has an incredibly long-standing relationship with their agency. Their relationship with VML goes back literally 7 decades. So just having that sense of trust in the people that you're working with, that's where you get the confidence to do something different in the moment that I think other brands just can't quite push themselves to do sometimes.
And I think just that idea of, kind of there's treasure everywhere. Anything can be a creative opportunity. Even if it's something that every other brand would be, trying to keep under wraps, even if it's literally crime. There was a fantastic talk from Locke Hall, who's one of the founders of the sunscreen brand Vacation.
Yes.
Contagious, big fan of the sunscreen brand Vacation. We've talked about on the podcast, we've written about them. So Locke Hall told this amazing story about how they try and make every little bit of what they do communicate in some way. So even if you order their sunscreen on Amazon, the unboxing it comes in is designed to create this kind of 80s world, sort of feel about it. So the sunscreen comes in a 1980s kind of pharmacy bag. There's a scratch card in there. There's all this stuff. And the receipt has been printed out on a 1980s dot matrix printer with little rippy bits up the side. And it was just fascinating to hear about. It's we started it. We started doing it. We're now so popular. We've got 18 or 19 of these things running away full time. They make a terrible racket. We've had to soundproof them. It's grossly inefficient in some ways. He said it's in some ways completely not cost effective either. And yet, he said their unboxing and general brand videos are getting, created by other people, are getting 5 million views on TikTok every week. And again, a little bit like the Kit Kat heist of always look for the creativity in something, even down to the receipt that you include in your packaging. I just thought it was a fantastic little reminder that there really is treasure everywhere. Every little bit of the experience can be made more creative, more joyful, and in a way that people will talk about.
And it's just the most fantastic kind of riposte to the kind of people who know the price of everything but the value of nothing. And I think the people who are fighting for value in whatever form they know they can make it kind of tangible or feelable to their audience, I think those are the people that we want to back in the next few months.
Right. So let's see if we can wrap this up. Have you got a pithy kind of take? Like overall, what's the signal coming out of Cannes? What do you think we may or may not see next year? What was your general overall kind of takeaway?
I think my main takeaway from Cannes is actually I'm feeling better about the industry again and more optimistic and re-energized. I think there's still a massive, massive issue underlying everything around trust and feeling secure in the information that we're surrounded by. It's just one of those feelings that is lurking on my shoulder at every turn over the last couple of years, because I feel profoundly disturbed by the threat to truth and accuracy that I feel is surrounding us at the moment. But like I say, on the other side, I've left the Cannes Lions feeling perkier and more optimistic and looking forward to what the industry will throw at us between now and the next festival.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, as we said earlier, there's a much stronger sense of optimism. I think the industry felt more confident. To me, it felt like there's three really big areas that aren't yet fully integrated. There's the work that's winning kind of the big awards, kind of what you might call the slightly more traditional creativity. There's the influx and the rising importance of creators, and there's AI. So all the things we've talked about today. Not to say that there's not some integration of these things. They just still feel a little bit separate, I think. But they're all kind of moving in the right direction. And I think that maybe the optimism comes from a sense that they can be integrated. So I think next year, expect to see more creators in the Palais itself. They were maybe a little bit outside, metaphorically and physically. I think more interesting use of AI. And I don't think the big traditional creative work is going anywhere.
I couldn't agree more. And I think what this industry does best when it's firing on all cylinders is see opportunities where other people see threats. And I really hope that kind of feeling continues as we move forward into the back end of the year.
Yeah, definitely. There was an amazing quote. I actually did, once again, blowing my own trumpet somewhat.
Did you do a talk, Alex?
I did a talk, but I didn't. You don't notice we haven't talked about my talk beyond just mentioning once that I've done it.
Sneak it in at the end.
Never going to let me forget it. There was a quote that I put in my talk, which apparently I'm not allowed to talk about, from Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA, the world's most valuable AI company. And it's an extraordinary quote. He says, if your CEO is using AI to cut headcount, it means one thing. They have no imagination. They got handed the most powerful tool in human history, and their first instinct was to fire people. And I think that is just the most incredible way to look at the current state of the industry. I think we have been handed this most incredible tool. And our business, the thing that we are fantastic at, above all else, is value creation. You know, I sort of made a quip that, it's not the Cannes Lion Festival of cost cutting, right? We celebrate creativity because it creates value. And I think the penny is maybe dropping in the industry that we shouldn't be going around cost cutting or headcount cutting. We should be here to create value.
That's a quote of the festival.
Thank you very much. I'll take it. It wasn't mine, but I did quote the person that said it. Thank you very much for joining us today. Everyone, if you want to find out more about any of the campaigns we talked about, we have interviewed all the people that have done some of the amazing winning work. We've really just scratched the surface. If you head to Contagious IQ, you'll see all this fantastic work. And of course, you'll learn the insights and the strategies from the people that made it. But from us today, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you either on our next show or in a year's time in Cannes. Au revoir, mes amis.
Au revoir.
This is Contagious.